the ACEs Optimus Show with your host, Dr. Craig Morris.
Hi, everyone. Dr. Craig Morris here. Welcome to ACEs Optimus. We are dedicated to optimizing human potential in the clinic of life. What the hell does that mean? It means we want to know, how do we improve ourselves individually? How do we become our best person? And today's guest is somebody who I think can teach us quite a lot about that. Our guest today is Dr. Brett Winchester from Winchester Spine and Sport in Troy, Missouri. Welcome, Brett.
Oh, thanks for having me, Craig. I'm excited to do it. I'm honored to do it, actually.
So we go back, I was trying to figure out, we both have known each other at least 15 years, but even farther, right?
It'd be longer than that because I was taking a DNS course that you had set up in Redondo Beach, which would have been in 2003. So it actually is, as crazy as it sounds, actually over 20 years. So
wow.
And that was such a big deal because you were the first one to have the DNS notes redone. And it was just so hard to follow the old notes. And I'll never forget those notes. They were printed out on yellow pages in a blue notebook that I still have. And it just made learning, reflex locomotion in DNS so much easier, which was awesome. And we had a ton of fun out there also, was the other thing.
Were you already in practice then?
I graduated in April of 2003. So I'm pretty sure that seminar occurred either that summer or maybe in the fall. So
right.
Yeah, I remember the weather was beautiful, but it's always beautiful there. So
yeah, we would hold all the original DNS courses there in Redondo in October and November. So it was right around there.
Probably the fall then. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
That's right. But you came out with your wife. And it was really great. It was great to meet you. And you were so enthusiastic. And when I met you, I thought, you know what? He's a really energetic, interesting, great young man. And so when you get to be a teacher and you start looking for young talent, so to speak, in the profession. And when I met you, I was excited to meet you. And I knew that you had some very good mentoring before we met. So I was curious, and from your historical standpoint, I'd like to understand today a little bit about your background, your education, because what you're doing, and everybody out there, we have really with us one of, I think, the real dynamos in the world of rehabilitation, clinical rehabilitation, and instructors and motivators. And what you've done since we first met, that 22 years ago, has been absolutely phenomenal. I'm very proud of you. So what started? What do you think were some of the foundational principles that really helped to drive you and inspire you and direct you?
Well, I think I had really good mentors with yourself. I know you were in one of the original groups that had gone to Prague with a guy named Clayton Skaggs. And so when I was in school, rehab wasn't as trendy and awesome in the chiropractic profession as it is now. So I was fortunate and lucky enough to get exposed to Clayton Skaggs when I was at Logan. And then once I kind of realized, what I had there, I just made it a point to be sure that I was, hanging out with him all the time. And so I did my preceptorship with him and really just, kind of followed him around. And then that's how I met yourself and some of those others that were in that original group. And, he had a connection back to Prague. So he had talked me into, making a couple trips with him there. And then, for me, it was just kind of like getting back to the Mecca. And, once I started to see like that model, which would be like Dr. Levitt's model and Vladimir Yanda, who had a huge influence, I know, in your life, I really kind of saw like what the Western part of the world was probably missing out in rehab. And then no different than yourself. I mean, I just surrounded myself with people like yourself and Clayton. And then whenever I could get myself back to the Czech Republic, I would, because you kind of knew at the time, even though DNS wasn't, a thing yet, that like that was going to be the way and that was the model. And it had already been, the driveway had already been started to be paved for that, but by those people before us. So, and as you know, Pavel's kind of carried that on, and we've got such a great team at DNS, and so that's what originally influenced me. And then I feel like when you get exposed to good material, then you just need 1,000 patients to start tinkering with it, and then you kind of see what your deficiencies are. And I feel like I've spent the last 25 years of my life just working on things that, just gaps that I needed to fill. And thankfully, the Prague school fills the majority of those gaps.
I think that's brilliant, brilliant history. I think I'm also curious because I've always said that chiropractic is a people's profession. You gotta be a people person
Yeah.
to really, I think, and the profession really grew, especially in the early parts of last century, patient by patient. And I consider you an optimal people's person. So you have wonderful ability to connect with people. You listen well, and you're excited to meet them. But so I think a lot of that, your success, and we all know real levels of success. It's multimodal in its foundation. But I think if there's anything you can think of, the people that you recall that had a big impact in your ability, because you're an extremely enthusiastic person and you're enthusiastic about your life and the things that you do. And I really think that's infectious. And I think that's something for people who are listening to consider, that how are their people skills? What drove you? What inspired you? Who taught you?
Well, like on the chiropractic side of thing, I had another important mentor on just the chiropractic side of it. That was Mark King, who's the
Mm-hmm.
president of MPI.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he, like in a different world, was helping me out in some different ways. And I feel like he owned, like yourself, like a lot of these. Now I call this the soft skills of being a good clinician, or sometimes I'll refer to it as like the it factor, which is completely different than everything that we just talked about, which is, being good at manipulation and rehab and soft tissue. But to really be a true healer, that's a totally different skill set that I think that's never taught to the students. And I think that would encompass some of the things that, you were talking about before, which is being empathetic, being able to, give tough love to, patients that need that. I think enthusiasm, but genuine enthusiasm, not like a cheesy, inauthentic, like, oh, everything's perfect in my life type thing, but like actual, true, yeah, just a good attitude. And at the end of the day, too, you got to enjoy what you do. And I really, as crazy as this sounds, 25 years into this, I love patient care. And, and I know I'm different than a lot of people my age. They burn out and they're looking for other things. But I kind of play a secondary game, and that game is every day of my life, I try to make myself better, like exponentially better. So although I'm hopefully, getting people better from a humanitarian standpoint, I'm also playing the game of making myself improve every single day of my life. And that comes through pattern recognition. That comes through not only like my treatment, what I'm saying to patients, what I'm learning about them. And that has really kept me from burning out. And in fact, it's done the opposite. I find myself just almost, yeah, really wanting to learn more. And, as we all know, like the more you think you know, the more you actually don't know. But I think that's been a key to my enthusiasm for it all, is just in a long Wednesday, or like you've been in the clinic forever and, people are kind of beating you down, just always keeping my mindset, like Carol Dweck says, like a growth mindset, and always making yourself better. And that to this date has never let me down. And actually, one time when I was in the Czech Republic, Dr. Levitt said that. He said that his best treatment will be his last treatment. And what he meant by that was that, he's got all those years of experience that are built into his hands, and just his ability to problem solve. So I think that's like what keeps me going. And then I just was always tried to take good care of the people around me. And So far, so good, quite honestly, and be respectful, and all those things.
Uh, I think that's a brilliant summary of what helped bring you there and help people to understand how you've grown and all of the students that you've taught, all those that you've mentored, because you've been an instructor at Logan University, and you've also then brought in students and in their later semesters at your clinic. And how many have you taught? How many have you mentored now so far?
I someone asked me that the other day. It's as far as like official interns at our office, it'd be hundreds. I mean,
Right.
it's like I think we have 6 right now. So yeah, and as like it's kind of a little bit of a pain in the butt to have interns because you got to always entertain them. But I remember how important it was for me when Clayton or Mark or yourself, like when you open the doors and you pull the curtains back, if you will, and it really forces you to do what you say you're teaching, and your results are out for everyone to see. So it's like for me, it was a really good pressure to not be a hypocrite, and be teaching on the weekends. And we all know the people that do this. They teach on the weekends and maybe they're not in practice, or maybe they're doing something completely different when they're in the office. So early on in my career, I just made it a point like I'm going to expose everything. The door is going to be open, and if I'm good at what I'm doing, my results are going to speak for themselves. I shouldn't have anything to hide behind. And like my interns tell me now, they learn more from me when cases aren't going the way that we want than the ones that are going well. So like that way they get to learn like how we talk our way through difficult cases, and just being humble. Like we're not able to like meet the goals of the patient, like, kind of doing, like, I call it an autopsy, looking back on the case. And even at this point in my life, like trying to figure out like things I didn't do well and what I could have done better to manage the case better. And that, I think that is again back to that growth mindset, which is helpful. But yeah, we've had a ton of interns, and we actually have like an intern curriculum. We do grand rounds. I actually on Thursday mornings work with our intern team on all the soft sides of being a good clinician. So we talk about some of those things that have nothing related to treatment, but how to be a good healer, how to be a good human, and yeah, and like how those can help also drive your clinical results besides the modalities that you're actually using to help the patient.
Right. This is actually the difference between being a clinician and being a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
We have to there was a great book written several years ago by an old chiropractor, Fred Barge, Dr. Fred Barge. And he was a mentor. His book on scoliosis really taught me a lot. And I took his course years and years ago. And he wrote a book on scoliosis, but he also wrote another book called Are You the Doctor, Doctor? And it was really a book about taking responsibility for your patient and what is your role and what is appropriate. And I learned so much from that because of his mentorship and his writing. And even in his scoliosis book, I had one episode that you'd probably be interested in with Professor Levitt, Carl Levitt. Is one time I would always question him and Professor Yonda, and they would generally get tired of it, and I'd too often disagree with them. And I was pretty consistent because I always lost the discussion, and they always had much better rationale, and I always lost, except one time with Professor Levitt, and that had to do with Fred Barge's book. We were talking about scoliosis, and Professor Levitt was a radiologist. He was a neuroradiologist instead of being a neurologist, and he said he was talking about the causes of scoliosis. And I said, yes, but there's this promontory. You can have an asymmetrical promontory on the sacral apex. And he says, what are you talking about? This is absurd. And we went at it a little bit, and I said, no, it's well documented. And he says, no. And so anyway, when I got home, I had the book and I took a photo of it, and I sent him that in a letter, like, this is what I was talking about. And he sent me back the most beautiful, humble letter saying, I stand corrected and I apologize. I'd never heard about this. And it was based on the work of Hugh Logan, by the way. And so, and he says, I never knew this. I'm going to immediately add this into my notes. And so, for me, it was a huge learning experience. One, to ask questions, because that's how we grow. And now, as a retired professor, I also know that one of our main goals when we go to our courses is to hear the question we haven't considered, right? Like, gosh, I never thought of that. We really love, like, tell me something I haven't considered, because now I can grow, right? And so for me, and his humility, from his brilliance, and he was a genius in so many levels, and starting the whole Prague school, and to have that type of kind humility and a beautiful letter. I have it somewhere, but it was an amazing experience to remember, stay open-minded and look, because you can always learn from everybody.
Yeah, and I think that like Dr. Levitt's book, when people ask me like, what's the one book that you think I should have?
Yes.
That book on manipulative therapy and rehabilitation, I feel like he was such a clean thinker.
Yes.
And like there's so much brilliance and simplicity. I feel like anybody can make a topic complex, but really truly intelligent people, they're really good educators because they're able to take complexity and whittle it down and make it easy for people to understand and digest. And I feel like, he was so good at that. And like he was such a good writer, like that book, like I still go back to that book quite a bit. And there's so many like really awesome clinical pearls in there. And yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really good point. I think that like when you're young, you think like, I'll speak for myself, you think you know more than people at certain things. And then you move along in your life and you realize like a lot of your mentors who you thought you had a disagreement on, you realize they're right about everything, and it's kind of like your parents, like you kind of slowly become your parents or morph into your parents oftentimes. And as you move along in your life, you just really realize like when you were younger, you thought you know something, but like, and then your mentors, a lot of times just out of pure respect, they don't want to cut you down. And then you almost feel like you need to call them daily and apologize for sometimes the way that you acted. So yeah, I think, the back to the internship, I mean, whatever like people like yourself or myself can do to mentor people, I think is it's really like the shadows will tell us we learn more in a day in the office than they will in a trimester at a chiropractic college. So like that's truly the way to kind of learn this trait, because I can't think of another profession where the actual education looks so different than what you're actually going to be doing every day of your life. So in saying that, if you don't have like somebody that you can go shadow and follow, like you're going to miss out on a really good opportunity of, how to manage cases and how to manage people, quite honestly.
And I think it's a great point. I think students need to hear that. And this certainly not only chiropractic students, but students in other healthcare professions, and also out there in the non-health world and the outside that, when they're going through to be able to integrate real life with that academic foundation. I mean, it gives you a basis for communication, for understanding. But then you're exposed to real life, and it's a different world. It's a different way. And I think
if you knew how hard the real world was, you'd never leave your parents' basement. So it's a good thing when you're young, you don't realize that you're kind of thrown into it.
That's right. I mean, either in that basement or at college, it doesn't really get any better than that. But most people don't realize that in many ways.
Yeah, well, and I mean, like just as an example too, like, you had spent so much time with Dr. Yanda, and like I missed out on him just because, he died before like I was coming into the profession.
Right.
And that's why like I'm so inquisitive with you, because I really want to know like everything that he was kind of thinking. And I feel like sometimes like we are so mesmerized by Pavel Kolaj, which rightfully so. And Pavel's so impressive that sometimes I feel like we forget about a Carol Levitt, or we forget about a Vladimir Yanda, and they had so many awesome things to offer too. It was just this superstar Pavel Kolaj was coming along, and I feel like there's some information in those other two camps that, like as a student, like that's part of the foundation of learning and even being better at DNS is to understand those original principles by Dr. Levitt and Dr. Yanda, and that kind of like allows you to be a better DNS practitioner. And I feel like we need people to be telling these stories like yourself that were around these like icons. That way, because I feel like if you were around them, then you sometimes discount how important that was in the place that you're at right now. So like being able to, yeah, and that's why I'm annoying with you. And I always ask, tell me a great Yanda story, or tell me a great story when you were in the Czech Republic, and because then I can kind of live vicariously through you, and I can understand like what they were thinking.
Well, I'm always happy to share those. I feel a responsibility. When he was nearing the end of his life, Yanda felt um, that there was much that he had learned that he hadn't shared fully and that he hadn't written about. As in fact, I was with him one day at his house also with Professor Levitt, and Levitt actually chastised him for that. In fact, now that you mention it, he says, Vladimir, you know, Vladimir, you have not been writing as you should, and you can't live forever. And you must get these things written down so that they're not forgotten. And they were very much like brothers, very kind and protective and warm at the same time, but also would get irritated with each other. And but on this one, he says, "Yes, you're right." And then he had said, don't make my mistakes. Get the word out. Teach everything, share everything, so that the next generations can take that and then it's really very much like a stair step. And each of these great minds, then they were one of the steps. They didn't have all the answers, but their questions, their insight, their brilliance, their integration then formed another way up the ladder, up the staircase for us in our understanding. And interesting, I think in the evolution of rehabilitation, people tend to focus on mistakes that were made, that they said this or they thought that, and that was proven incorrect, and that's okay. And I talked to Yanda about that, and he says that's okay. At least I got them talking about it. I got them thinking about it. And so he says that's how we grow. That's humanity's growth. And so that's kind of my job, and it's your job now, and you're doing a fantastic job. Speaking of your job and your work, your travels now are now. I've been fortunate. I was very lucky, and I've had a chance to travel the world and all 6 continents and to teach. And I think you're in the process of getting right there also and traveling the world. I believe you said even this year you're going to be going to Australia for the first time.
Yeah, I go to Paris, which I have been to Paris quite a bit, but then I go to Australia for the first time in November. Yeah, I'm excited. Very excited.
Is the Paris, is that going to be the European Chiropractic Union meeting
No,
or?
it is a private seminar.
Hmm.
I can't think off the top of my head the exact organization, the name, but
Yeah.
yeah, so that's just a manipulation seminar, and actually the
Mm.
Australian one is too. And it's kind of like as my career has gone on, and I tell anyone who listen to this, I kind of walk around with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder because I feel like chiropractors, they're so important in the healthcare team, but a lot of times we're kind of the low man on the totem pole, and I don't feel like that's deserved, quite honestly. So, I kind of look at one of the ways that hopefully I'll lead the profession is, I want to, be an ambassador for, what a chiropractor does and how important we are in the healthcare system as a portal of entry. We can save the healthcare system so much money by people starting with us, starting with more of a conservative type care. And then if we need to escalate, medical treatment, then we can. But I feel like and like, well, I'll speak for the United States, like we enter the funnel, a lot of our patients enter on the wrong end of the funnel, where if they would enter with like a well-trained chiropractor, then so many of the downstream cost wouldn't be, or imaging wouldn't be necessary. So I'm a competitive human being. I'm very competitive. So like I take it personally when chiropractors get slighted and things like that. So, and I'm different than a lot of people in the evidence-based group. Like I'm actually really proud to be a chiropractor. I'm proud of our, our past. I'm proud of our history. You'll never hear me cut any previous chiropractor down. I mean, I feel like, again, like, as a profession, obviously we've done something right because we're over our, 120 years old at this point, or however long it's been, and 130 years actually. So yeah, I think it's a beautiful profession, and you can make a great living. You help people all day long, and we usually do it without drugs and surgery, which is also a win for the patient. Doesn't mean we're against drugs and surgery. It just means like we have a more holistic approach.
Right. I remember, as you know, Robin McKenzie wrote a couple chapters, contributed a couple chapters in my textbook, and we got to know each other very well at American Back Society. And I thought it was amazing, a 180-degree turnaround from his perspective as a physiotherapist in New Zealand, who was dead set against chiropractors being integrated into their national health care system and reimbursement system. And he went from that position, and in fact, well, the first time I ever heard him speak at American Back Society in front of about 500 people, he was on a question and answer panel, and they asked, the question that was posed to him is, when is chiropractic appropriate? And when should you refer and utilize chiropractic care? And he says, oh, that's easy, never. It's a one-word answer.
Right.
And by the time later in his life, and when he and I would email back and forth, in addition to when we would be together at American Back Society, and by the time at the end, he had a 180-degree opinion of chiropractic. And he was, in fact, he was integrating chiropractic into the McKenzie protocols. He had several chiropractors who were McKenzie instructors, and I was a little bit negative, or not negative. I was a little bit down about this, any divisions or problems between physical therapy and chiropractic. And he says, you know what? You just remind the people, Craig, that it's the patient that we all exist for. And anybody that doesn't want to work together, team together, then they're not focusing on patient's best interest, and stuff them, was what he said.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I think like one of the misconceptions about Rob McKenzie was that he never laid his hands on his patients. And like if you talk to any of the current McKenzie instructors who had hung out with Robin, they say like, he was giving overpressure all the time, even from an assessment standpoint, because it was helping him so much to determine like in their world, like what the right classification was going to be. So there's this really big misconception that McKenzie's this total hands-off approach. And in reality, Rob McKenzie was laying his hands on his patients way more than what he thought. I think his big take-home message was, the patient isn't able to take your hands home with them. So, that way you need to give them something at home. And Dr. Levitt honestly was really big, obviously, on corrective exercise. And yeah, so I mean and I think that's been an important part of like the chiropractic rehabilitation side of it, which is a little bit different than physical therapy. I guess the chiropractor who's utilizing rehab principles, we don't necessarily believe that, 3 times a week you need to come spend an hour in our office. We feel like we can be a sniper in our approach to our assessment, and then we can give real targeted exercises that are catered to that patient's needs. And you don't need to be, doing remedial exercise that is just kind of a waste of time. And I feel like that's where there's been a sweet spot for the chiropractic profession and rehabilitation that might separate us a little bit from typical physical therapy, maybe. Yeah. That's not a knock on physical therapists. It's just like the nuances and the differences of the two professions.
I think that as time goes by, we're still in a transition with so much new information coming in, and also standards as far as electronic medical records. Very often the records almost, it's like the tail wagging the dog, and that we tend to get stuck in protocols that we have to do because of reimbursements and all of these things, and that we've lost some of the spontaneity in clinical practice. And I think we have to be careful to make sure we keep the patient up front. And I think also the idea of teamwork, and we need more experience, more opportunities for working as a team. I know you do. That was paramount for me in practice. When I started practice, one orthopedist in town in the southern LA area would accept a referral from a chiropractor. Only one. And I needed to know what they were doing. And so I set out to, meet them, to reach out, to invite them to dinner. I know you've done the same things to get to know them. And I told them, if I send you a patient and they need surgery, I would like to be invited in. I want to see what's going on in there. And that's how I'd learn. And so we have to be, each of us has to take responsibility, whether you're a physician, whether you're a physical therapist, chiropractor, massage therapist, trainer, none of us have all the answers. And if it's for the patient we exist, then the more we can communicate and teamwork, then that's in the patient's best interest. And I know you've been doing exactly the same thing, and you've been going around the world now saying these kinds of things about teamwork and about our own responsibility, though, as healthcare providers.
Well, everything you just said is summed up with like what the new hot button word is, which is making the patient the locus of care, or the center of care.
Yes.
And yes, I think, and we've known this for a while, but I feel like now the consumer, or the client, or the athlete, they're also kind of clamoring and looking for this also. And the patients, with ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, these patients come to us, they know so much already a lot of times before we even walk in the treatment room. So, and people think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, like that way, we can educate them, we can arm them with tools to kind of help them and help their problem. It doesn't mean that you need to cut yourself out of that equation. I think that's a big mistake out of the evidence-based group right now. If you see a difficult case, you don't have a miracle for them in 1 or 2 visits. So you may need to see them, on like a kind of a treatment plan early on. And you don't have to feel ashamed about that. I mean, you're just kind of the liaison for them into the healthcare system. And I think that's sometimes a mistake out of the far evidence-based side of things, where they think they're going to fix everybody in one visit, and you'll get better if you just put them on a walking program. You don't need manual therapy. All these thoughts, I think, are a little bit of not a mistake, but not accurate. So it's a blend of everything that you've been talking about in our interview that makes for really good world-class care.
Brilliant. Next question. You're seeing and you're working with a lot of students in your courses as you're going around the world now. And I think that with changes in technology, with the way we gain information, we have an evolving student, a different way, and our students now learn a little bit differently. They integrate information differently. They integrate whether it's artificial intelligence or different types of social media, different ways of collecting information. And I'm wondering your thoughts, one, in the instruction, how you're seeing it's changing as so that you keep your audience with you, so that you're able to bring them along in a way that they can connect with. And 2, what advice do you have for students, whether it's medicine or physical therapy or chiropractic or whatever, as far as their focus, their emphasis, and their attitude?
Yeah. I mean, I think like those of us who are a little bit older sometimes will feel the frustration of like I think the new Generation Z. But then like you'll find some bright lights in that generation that are a perfect storm of, they might know social media really well, they might know technology really well, and some of the old codgers, they're not good in that part. So like those younger generations, sometimes like the stars line up and they're good at a bunch of different things. I think that I will say sometimes, and I don't know why this is, but the younger generations might not have maybe as much grit as you had or I had maybe, and like the absolute thirst for information. And I kind of knew going into it, like I knew that, and I learned this from my parents. They're like, education's never a waste of money, So I was more than willing to go in a lot of debt to educate myself. And I feel like now, whether it's through COVID or technology, whatever it is, there's so much information that's out there for free that I feel like people aren't educating themselves the way that they should, or they're getting their CE hours, on like a virtual thing where they're also, hanging out with their family. They got other stuff going on in their house. So like the attention span isn't probably what it would be if they were actually live in that seminar. And I feel like that's kind of been a bad trend. Maybe I do understand the convenience of it, but then I feel like there's something to be said about like actually showing up at a seminar, being forced to pay attention, not having your phone on, like, and just being forced to digest information. And yeah, I think, and Mark Cuban, I saw this on an interview he had this week. He said that you don't just want to be a consumer of information. You need to also be working on being a creator of information. And in that process, even if you end up in finding out that you're not right on everything, you'll definitely be better off in your attempt to be thinking in this way and not just always consuming information.
Right.
And then, I mean, I think like, as you know better than anybody, like you can't, you don't, if you can't teach, or if you don't, to be a teacher, you got to really know a topic. So, being forced to teach is one way to really like make yourself know a topic. And that's what we always try, like with our interns and other people at our office. We make them teach something because I know in the back of my mind, if they're forced to teach it, then they're going to be forced to know it.
Yes. And in the end, doctor means teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
In Latin foundation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, very good. Well, we're running out of time. Where are your next courses? Where are your next travels?
I got a kind of a fun one. I got Life University. They have their huge seminar coming up in September. So Life has traditionally been one of the more philosophical schools, and they're really trying to like kind of switch, not take away their heritage of the school that was originally started there, but they're wanting to bring in some new ideas. So I got a 2 hour lecture there, and then I got a good one we talked about Paris, Australia. I got the group from the Aldoa group. I got a seminar in Dallas that's going to be combining DNS with Aldoa way of thinking with a guy named Scott Herrera. Um, we got some DNSC. I got Vancouver. I'll be around in the fall, like moving around, doing my thing. So
Well,
yeah,
I don't know if I'll
so
see
Nick.
you. We'll keep in touch, but I don't know. We've had some wonderful time together and wonderful visit. A couple years ago, after our DNS instructors course, we spent some time together in Normandy and checked out the area of D-Day, which was amazing for the two of us, right?
Oh, for anyone who'll listen, Craig Morris, for all he knows about chiropractic, he knows just as much about history. And I was just lucky and blessed. Like, and I'm kind of a historian myself, but to have you with me because you knew so much about World War II and yeah, all the battles at Normandy, and it was like having a personal tour guide there And it was just a really special couple days that we spent there together, I think.
Well, the closer, more you realize that as years go by, that a big part of your life now it falls into the historical category. You feel closer to it and probably a little bit more inspired to pay attention to it. So maybe that's been my inspiration.
And history repeats itself, doesn't it? So
if we don't learn,
we can kind of learn as we move along.
Absolutely. Brett, I really would like to thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you here in the future. If I don't see you before, we'll see you next year at the DNS instructors course in Prague and at the D course. And if any of you are taking your DNS courses, Brett's got his at gestalt.com, right? Is that your website?
It'll be now on our clinic website, Winchester Spine and Sport. So okay. Yeah, a little tweak there, and
okay.
Yeah. So
and we've got our 2026 schedule also coming up for acesforme.com. That's aces4me.com. Thank you, Brett.
Oh, I'm honored. Yeah, I can't tell you how much I owe you, and I thank you, Craig. Really appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Aces Optimist Show. Catch you on the next one.